the Station of the Cross, proclaiming the fullness of truth with clarity and charity.
Heard around the world on your Android and Apple mobile devices.
The Simple Truth, rising up to explore the difficult topics of real life. Join us as we proclaim the good, the true, and the beautiful with the simple truth of Jesus Christ and His Holy Catholic Church through Scripture, tradition, and the Catechism. And now, your host, Jim Havens.
Great to be back with you on The Simple Truth, where we proclaim the life-giving reality of Jesus and His Catholic Church. We consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong heart of St. Joseph. It is Throwdown Thursday, where we focus on themes of spiritual warfare and the real challenges that are before us, all to better understand the battles that we are in, to actively, effectively engage in fighting the good fight, to participate with the grace of God that is being lavished upon us, and to share in the victory of Christ now and for all eternity. Our guest today is Timothy Gordon. He is a Catholic husband and father of 6. He holds degrees in literature, history, philosophy, and law, currently teaches philosophy and theology, and Tim is the author of the books Catholic Republic, Rules for Retrogrades, and his newest offering, to be released on October 1st by Sophia Institute Press, The Case for Patriarchy. You can find it at sophiainstitute.com. Tim also hosts the Rules for Retrogrades podcast, and you can learn more about him and all of his good work at timothyjgordon.com. Tim Gordon, great to have you with us today. How are you?
Great to be here. I'm excited to get this interview on the books.
Awesome. Yes, me too. So quick intro here. As you point out in the book, The Case for Patriarchy, in 1981, Sister Lucia of the Fatima Apparitions wrote a letter to Cardinal Carlo Caffarra in which she wrote, quote, "Father, a time will come when the final battle between the kingdom of Christ and Satan will be over marriage and the family, and those who will work for the good of the family will experience persecution and tribulation, but do not be afraid because Our Lady has already crushed his head." Then in 2017, Cardinal Caffarra said that what Sister Lucia wrote to me, he said, is being fulfilled today. In your new book, The Case for Patriarchy, you write, quote, "The good cardinal's observation rings true, especially in light of the ongoing overthrow of the household patriarchy, all but consummated in our day. The proliferation of homosexualism and more recently transgenderism adds force to his remark, but the vast majority of the diabolical firepower against society belongs to the attack on the family through the attack on the father," end of quote. So we're going to get into a lot today about the history behind this overthrow of household patriarchy, where we're currently at, where we ought to go, practical advice. But first, cast the vision for us. Tim, help us to clearly see what the enemy has stolen. What are the broad strokes of the positive vision for patriarchy?
That's a great question. Most people underestimate feminism by casting its lots in with the other subversive leftisms, which is to say feminism, one among the many, Marxism, homosexualism, transgenderism, socialism, fascism, right? These are all leftisms or collectivisms of our day that oppose themselves to Christianity and are really bad. Well, the full story is this, that I think is a grabby way of letting the reader know early on in my book how serious feminism is, and to be a little bit more to the point, how much more serious feminism is than even these other grave subversive evils. Feminism alone among these things is associated with the original sin, associable with the original sin. The original sin, Eve sins first, according to all of the patristic fathers, Augustine, Ambrose, Jerome, John Chrysostom. Eve sins first. She sins first because she committed an act and Adam omitted to act. This two-part sin is called feminism. When a woman stands down, when a man stands down and his wife stands up in the order of the household taxonomy, this is feminism. And literally all of us have to pay one death. Many people now wind up in hell. The sufferings of sin, suffering, sickness, torment, death, sometimes eternal punishment. This all follows upon the original sin of Adam and Eve in the garden, when a man omitted to act and his wife committed an act, a sinful act in his stead. So that's just me trying to set the table for you, Jim, because it is so momentous. Feminism is tied originarily to the original leftist, as Saul Alinsky noted. Satan is the original radical in his book Rules for Radicals. And it is the central subversive ideology to all of the other apparatchik subversive ideologies of the left today as we go. And that's why abortion, the central satanic act of the feminists, is the most sacrosanct thing in leftism. I also want to just point out as another kind of grabby moment that the other sexual familial deconstructions of our day, homosexualism and transgenderism, are just spin-offs of feminism. Think about it. Feminism, which really dates to 1848, we'll talk about how long it took to base. It posits the idea that a man and a woman can fungibly switch places, like I just said with Adam and Eve. Well, if that's true, then they can essentially be fungible in the bedroom, right? You can swap out a man for the woman in the bedroom, swap out a woman for a man. That's just homosexualism. And metaphysically, if either of the first two propositions are true, then a man could just, at his whimsy, become a woman or be a woman. That's transsexualism. So feminism is, notwithstanding its contradictions and its tensions with the other two, the feminists don't like, trannies in sports, for obvious reasons, because it shows difficulties that women have built in playing sports. It is the originary source. And look how fast the left moved on this ground. Like, feminism took about 100 years to set and bake and set, however that goes. I don't cook. So it literally took from about 1848 to, think of it as like 1948, when feminism really kicked off in America, 1950s, late 50s or so. So 100 years. Then homosexualism started getting baked into American culture in the middle 90s and really took full sway by the mid to late 2000s, so about 10 years. I mean, Prop 8 in California was 06 or something. So it's 10 years. And then transgenderism moved really fast in 2015 to 2016. It was basically 1 year. So we have declining orders of magnitude of 10 in terms of the increasing speed. I mean, it's an exponential function. We talk about the speediness of the subsets of feminism, which is to say homosexualism and transgenderism. They sped up, but the time it took for them to base is logarithmic, right? It dropped from 10 to the power of 2 with feminism, and then 10 to the power of 1 with homosexualism, and 10 to the power of 0 with transgenderism. It just shows once feminism got into the host, the American so-called republic, then everything else was just set to fall. And Cardinal Kafara, hopefully we'll talk about his words a little bit more later, it's just all fait accompli at this point.
Yeah, I appreciate you laying that out. I do want to get into more of the history in the next segment, but real quick here, just to lay out kind of the broad strokes here, can you just explain what this patriarchy, the positive vision, is all about in terms of, especially in terms of the household patriarchy? So there's these two branches I get from your book on the patriarchy, right? You've got this lay patriarchy of male householders who act as domestic priest, prophet, and king. But then there's also, of course, the ecclesiastical patriarchy, comprising exclusively male priests and bishops succeeding Jesus's all-male apostles. Can you just lay that vision out a little bit for us?
Sure. Well, it's really clear, and it's what makes my book, I guess, uncharacteristic to my other works, bizarrely ecumenical, is that any stripe of Christian, Eastern Orthodox, Catholic, or Protestant, can embrace the argument that I'm making fundamentally. Now, why? That's because, well, patriarchy is fully biblical. And while the Protestants don't affirm with we Catholics or the Eastern Orthodox that there is a clerical patriarchy, right? They believe in the priesthood of all believers. They do affirm, along with Catholics and Eastern Orthodox, that there's a household patriarchy because there's so much scriptural evidence. I'm talking 7 or 8 places in St. Paul's epistles in inerrant scripture. And of course, all 3 types of Christian believe scripture is inerrant. So you can't argue with this stuff. But also because the Old Testament is so rife with it. So it's fair to say Catholics and Eastern Orthodox, 2/3 of the types of Christians, affirm the clerical patriarchy, even as that's sort of the more inarguable proposition by the typical Catholic standards today. But all 3 types of Christian together affirm the lay patriarchy, which is supposedly the more controversial claim, which is ridiculous.
Yes, and we're going to be back on the other side of this break to get into this further. But what I want to invite people to really consider right now is just the fact that we are soaking in this culture 150 years, more than that, 170-ish years from the original tenets of feminism being put forth into our culture, and then all these various waves of it getting progressively worse as we go. We are soaking in these presuppositions. So how many of them do we hold and not even realize it? What is your sense even to hear the word patriarchy, right? Is that a bad word? We're going to dive into this deeper and unpack this. We need this show today, and we're going to get into so much that is going to be so helpful. So come on back. Stay tuned.
There's no better way to start your day than with spiritual formation from inspiring priests.
Relationships between men and women are so fundamentally important for the church and for the world that when there is a dysfunction in relationships between men and women, there are particularly fundamental, crucial problems for the church and for the world.
That's Sermons for Everyday Living, weekdays from 6 to 7 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
Each weekday from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern, the Station of the Cross brings you Mother Miriam Live.
Don't let circumstances determine your life and your peace and your love and your sacrifice.
Tune in from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern for Mother Miriam Live on the Station of the Cross and our free iCatholic Radio mobile app. You can also watch the video stream every day on Facebook or on YouTube.
Are you ready to take on the world, the flesh, and the devil with just the facts? This is Jesse Romero, host of Jesus 911, heard weekdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. I'm joined each day by a variety of co-hosts like Ruben Nava, Paul Clay, Dan Schneider, and my amazing wife, Anita Romero. We tackle Catholic devotions, spiritual warfare, family life, saving America, and everything in between. Join us each weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific for Jesus 911. God bless you. Keep the faith.
There's so much confusion in our world today over what love is. By displaying a Catholic Radio bumper magnet on your car, you'll help others understand love as designed by God. Order your free bumper magnets at thestationofthecross.com. We'd be happy to send bumper magnets for your listening area so that others can come to know the Lord. That's thestationofthecross.com. Thank you for sharing Catholic Radio on the road.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today, Tim Gordon. Tim is the author of the new book, The Case for Patriarchy. It is to be released on October 1st by Sophia Institute Press. You can find it at sophiainstitute.com. You can also learn more about Tim and all of his good work at timothyjgordon.com. feminist.com. So let's get into the bad news a little bit further in what happened here. This is a helpful example. This is an exchange at a feminist roundtable meeting in New York City in the early 1970s. It went something like this. "Why are we here today?" the chairwoman asked. "To make revolution," they answered. "What kind of revolution?" she replied. "The cultural revolution," they chanted. "And how do we make cultural revolution?" she demanded. "By destroying the American family," they answered. "How do we destroy the American family?" she came back. "By destroying the American patriarch," they cried exuberantly. "And how do we destroy the American patriarch?" she probed. "By taking away his power." "How do we do that?" "By destroying monogamy," they shouted. Tim, you write that on the stated objective for feminists of the early 1970s to destroy the American patriarch, you point out that it includes not only the household husband and father, the priest of the domestic church, but by implication, the dominion of parish priests as well. And it is here that the concept of feminist anti-religiosity becomes fixed. You write elsewhere that, quote, "The simple truth is that so-called Christian feminists cannot rightly exist. Fundamentally, feminism seeks to topple the patriarchy, and the patriarchy they seek to topple is Christianity itself." You go on to argue that feminism cannot be mixed with certain worldviews, such as conservatism, Christianity, the pro-life movement, and so on. And you draw this conclusion from examining feminism's ancient prefigurements together with a proper view of its three modern waves. Help us to see what you're seeing here. You already talked a little bit about examining feminism's ancient prefigurements in terms of our original parents, Adam and Eve, and the occasion of original sin, which you say constitutes the first instance of gender bending ever. But explain a little bit more on this. Anything else to say about Adam and Eve in this? And also, what about the apocryphal fictional Lilith?
Yeah, well, great question. I mean, like I said before, Adam and Eve were the first feminists. Original sin was the first act of feminism. Well, there's a commissive part and an omissive part. And, you know, the New York City boardroom discussion that you talked about, a bunch of feminists, I think in 1970, Mallory Millett makes this claim. What's so remarkable about it, as allegedly, if you buy the sort of losing center-right characterization of feminism, is that it only became bad around this time. It was good in its first iteration, or its so-called first wave, in the middle 1800s through the first half of the 1900s, but only became bad in 1970. This is really, really pernicious. It's a pernicious lie. And the proof is kind of in the pudding. In my book, I say, okay, the boardroom where they're chanting all this stuff, we want to make revolution, we want women out of the home, we want women away from kids, we want women having fornicative type sex, we want women having the jobs of men, we want women having the vocations of clerics. These things are all named together as quote-unquote radical new second wave feminism. The way, you know, losing conservatives always cede far too much. You know, they cede that first wave feminism is good. That's why we always lose, we Christians, we conservatives. Well, it's a lie. And what I do is I tie that boardroom chant that you were citing from Mallory Millett, to the memorialized document called the Declaration of Sentiments from that very first year of first wave feminism, 1848, same year that the Communist Manifesto came out. And it was something that was memorialized from a meeting that the feminists had in 1848 at the Seneca Falls Convention. They reified the minutes. Elizabeth Cady Stanton is the author of those minutes. And they reflect, as I point out in the book, the exact same 6 goals that ostensibly, if you listen to lying or clueless conservatives who cede too much to the left, were only unique, novel goals of second wave feminism. So it turns out feminism is feminism is feminism. The first wave of feminism being quote unquote about, or quote unquote directed to, just female enfranchisement, which is a whole other question, whether that's good or bad. I don't weigh in on that. But it's certainly the most innocuous goal associated with first wave feminism. And guess what? The first wave feminists in 1848, they didn't even care about it. It was barely spoken about. It was one among many other issues. And the issues they talked about more at the Seneca Falls Convention were much more heavily devoted topically to the topics of, that boardroom chant, the 5 or 6 items I mentioned before. So the point is, there is no good feminism if first, second, and eventually third wave feminism are all evil. There is no good feminism if feminism is fundamentally averse to Christianity, to the orders of God, to the orders of God's nature, man and woman, particularly complementarity, the way that he made us fit together anatomically and functionally. And that's another thing you see in the writings of all the first wave feminists, who tended to be liberal Protestant American women. They were all attacking this doctrine of Christian complementarity. Men and women can't be lied about. We can't allow American Christians going forward to believe that men and women go together. You can't deny it. Men and women are attracted to each other, same way, not to be too crass, the way a plug finds a wall socket, right? That's part of the teleology of nature that is utterly undeniable. And yet they've been incredibly effective at denying it. How many men say, oh, my wife is really the boss? She's smaller, she's less fast, she's less strong, her hand-eye coordination is different, her brain chemistry is way less accommodating of leadership. They've done all kinds of studies on it. She couldn't be an effective soldier. Joan of Arc never fought in one battle. And there's just a lot of propaganda out that has convinced people of an obvious lie, same as transgenderism in our day. A lot of obvious propaganda, obviously wrong propaganda, that men can't have babies. Well, this began with feminism. And I would just cite one dialogue that I don't cite in the book. I learned it through my friend Michael Knowles' new book. It takes place sometime between what we call the chronology of first wave and second wave feminism, between young Betty Friedan and an aging Simone de Beauvoir. And once, the former is American, the latter is French, what the French Simone de Beauvoir tells Betty Friedan is like, look, in our country in France, we understand that if feminism is going to succeed, women around the homes have to be forced legislatively, the point of a gun, out of the home. Because complementarity is so true, because of course women, they don't want to go get jobs and leave their children in government centers. It sounds like something that happens at a Holocaust camp, right? Women don't want to do that. Women don't want to pretend to be bosses or care about careers. So we have to force them. And then we'll do so through a series of cultural propagandas that support the laws. But we use force and shame. Now, Betty Friedan said, well, in America, we only are going to use shame. And Simone de Beauvoir says, well, then you're not going to have as effective of feminism, right? Shame will work. I mean, it's worked pretty effectively on American suburbs women, but not as much as it did, not quite as much as it did in Europe. But there you have it, out of the mouths of two feminists in between the time period of first and second wave feminism, admitting this is utterly out of accord with what is goodly and godly and natural, and it's utterly a function of, the satanic, diabolical mindset, which is ultimately geared towards destroying the family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very important addition that you put in there, that I have not seen this put forth, an examination of history in this way. I have seen put forth many times this idea of somehow feminism can be a Christian feminism or a pro-life feminism and all of this. That's why the history that you put forth here, it's very interesting and very important, and not just the history, but the philosophy that you put forth here. Again, you say it's a distinction of degree, which is really all the concept of waves insinuates in the first place. The three waves of feminism establish some of history's starkest distinction without a difference. You say, since first wave feminism germinated all the deadly properties seen later in the second and third waves, we cannot afford to speak of it as the original good feminism. Such a thing does not exist. All feminism attempts to overthrow the patriarchy. And so, I wrestle with this as I was reading it. I'm like, this makes sense. I'm going to do a little digging myself on history. Didn't have to go far before I was able to confirm this. So I want to play a quick clip. This is a woman by the name of Naomi Wolf. I'm not familiar with her, but she claims to have had a hand in coining the phrase third wave feminism. And here she is in an interview being asked what the definition of that phrase is. This is how she explains it. Her definition for third wave feminism. Here it is.
What's the definition? I don't think it really needs to have a rigorous definition. I've never been one who's a fan of labels. To me, it just means women who are younger, substantially younger than second wave feminists. Does that generation of third and probably now fourth wave feminists have a different style in their feminism? I think there's some differences.
All right, so there she is. She says, look, it's just women who are younger and have a different style. Basically, she's saying there are differences, but they're stylistic, not at the level of substance. So there it is. Is she seeing it as you're seeing it?
Yeah, one good thing about the left, this might be the only good thing about the left, Jim, is the far leftists, not the ones in politics, they're incredibly honest. Saul Alinsky dedicated his book, Rules for Radicals, to Satan and called Satan, as I said before, the original radical. The first feminists, the first wave feminists, were mostly liberal Protestant types that said, look, there's a huge contradiction between all of our Christian teachings that we're sort of tossing out the window with the liberal Protestant, new German form of Protestantism in the latter half of the 1800s. We're kind of inclined to do that anyway, and it's good because complementarity in the teachings of God on nature, man's nature, woman's nature, the way things work in general, natural attractions, alterity, sexual difference, things like that. Obviously, men are bigger, stronger, faster, leaderly, and it's even reflected in the drives we see that men have. Men today, because they're not leading their wives, they go out and they're weekend warriors, and they try to boss around other men in ways they don't need to be bossed around. Men have the natural drive for leadership, and therefore, if they don't lead their family, they're going to be constantly dealing with what's called a block switch. Lead your families, lead your wives, lead your children as nature created you to, and you'll be satisfied.
Yeah, so when we get back, we're going to delve into this a little bit. Tim writes that sometime during the 19th century, self-loathing feminists, socialists, cultural engineers grew bored with the female virtues, began encouraging widespread female aspiration to the male virtues. To the chagrin of Western civilization, they fixed what wasn't broken and thereby created a monstrosity. We're going to look into that monstrosity for a little bit, and then we're going to see that positive vision, practical advice. We'll be right back.
If you're looking to make the most out of what you can donate to Catholic Radio, making a transfer of stock is a great opportunity for your giving to go even further in support of the Station of the Cross Catholic Radio Network. Please consider this option in helping us spread the gospel message over the airwaves and through mobile devices. Many people donate to charities by gifting stock. There are even substantial tax benefits for donating stock to a charity such as ours. Would you like to learn more about the possibility of gifting stock to the Station of the Cross Catholic Radio Network? Please call us at 1-877-888-6279. That's 1-877-888-6279. You can also visit us online at thestationofthecross.com. That's thestationofthecross.com. Thank you for your support of Catholic Radio. May God bless you and your family.
This is Jesuit Father Robert McTague, your daily host of the Catholic Current.
Join me on Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern for Doubleheader. We'll be looking at the new law in Texas that prohibits abortion once a fetal heartbeat is detected. We'll look at the legal aspect with Terry Schilling of the American Principles Project. Then we'll connect again with Dr. Tara Sandra Lee to discuss the medical meaning of this new law. Stay informed by joining us at the Catholic Current on Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern, coming to you from the Station of the Cross and the iCatholic Radio mobile app.
We offer several ways to view our programming grid, including at our website, thestationofthecross.com, and on our iCatholic Radio app. Just click the menu icon in the top left portion of our app and select the link to our programming grid. That's at thestationofthecross.com and on our free iCatholic Radio app for Android and Apple mobile devices.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here. Our guest today, Timothy Gordon, author of The Case for Patriarchy. It is a book to be released on October 1st by Sophia Institute Press. You can find it at sophiainstitute.com. You can also learn more about Tim and all of his good work at timothyjgordon.com. Important conversation here today on The Case for Patriarchy, but again, it's going to be very limited to what we can get to in the time frame that we have. You're going to want to get this book and really dive into it. Again, The Case for Patriarchy, sophiainstitute.com. But some of the bad fruits that have come forth after this whole attack on the patriarchy that has been so successful that we almost knee-jerk think of the word patriarchy in sort of negative terms just by hearing it. Some of the bad fruits that are very, very clear. One is contraception. Tim writes that almost all women who identify as religious have used contraceptive methods. 99% of mainline Protestants, evangelical Protestants, and Catholics denying marriage's procreative impulse equates to a denial of its first and best reason for being, its telos, its purpose or goal. The family's first goal is procreation, and its second is the unity and virtuous happiness of its spouses. So the healthiest instance of a family is a thriving, actively procreative family. Also, on the category of pornography, in 56% of divorces, at least one spouse has an obsessive interest in porn. A staggering 70% of men report looking at porn at least once a month. Unsurprisingly, 98% of all men report having looked at pornography at least once in their life, I presume it means there. But far more surprisingly, that same 98% of all men, maybe a different set here, I suppose, I don't know, but 98% of all men also report having looked at pornography in the past 6 months. That is alarming. 98% looking at pornography in the past 6 months. Instead of being honorable, chaste, restrained, protective, highly attracted to their wives, today's household men are furtive, perverted, unrestrained, unprotective, and ostensibly not attractive to their wives. So this is the reality that we're in. We're soaking in these bad fruits. So to repropose here, Tim, this vision that does come to us from the Holy Spirit through Scripture, tradition, the magisterium of a real, rightly ordered patriarchy, to repropose it in these times, women are looking over there at men and men are looking at women and they're thinking, how are we going to put this thing back together again? What woman wants to follow a man who is this furtive, perverted, unrestrained, unprotective, ostensibly not attractive to their wives? We're in a bad state. Help us out with this.
Well, it does begin. I want to begin my answer with a caution. All right. So the caution is that the unspoken first rule of feminism is the following: never, for any reason, at any time, at any place, blame a woman for anything. Always claim that if a woman is being blamed for something, it's invasive, forcible, it's rape, it's a violence, it's chauvinism or misogyny, hatred or fear of the female body, particularly the lower half of the female body, something like that. You get the point. So you'll notice it in public. if a woman does something really bad, and it should be uncontroversially bad enough to warrant everyone's opprobrium, everyone's shame, people get uncomfortable. I mean, you might not recognize it now, but start looking. Over the next 2 weeks after you hear this interview, go listen to your TVs, listen to YouTube, look at interactions, even in public. I mean, people got really uncomfortable. I did an interview with Matt Fradd 2 summers ago. I was just talking about a really, really badly misbehaving household wife in Disney World that I'd seen the night before I did the interview with Matt Fradd, and we were talking about feminism. And, like, I didn't name the lady's name. I didn't know the lady's name. But she was such acting like a spoiled brat in public, being really rude to a husband who was being really nice and trying to get her a drink. And when it was really hot in the Orlando summer, Matt got uncomfortable. A bunch of people in his audience got uncomfortable just because I was saying, look, I'm not saying she's bad because she's a woman. I'm saying she's a woman who is being bad. They were literally like, well, what do you know, Tim? You know, her husband might have run over her with a tractor before they'd gone to Disney World. I'm like, that's not a common sense assumption. That's not the typical standard of review that we apply anywhere else in life, and no one believes this. He's trying to buy her a drink, and she's throwing a fit, right? So the point is, the first rule of feminism that the left is so good at baking into everyone's mindset without you knowing it. It wouldn't work if you knew that they were baking it in. They do it insidiously. Is that first rule of feminism: never blame a woman for anything, anywhere, right? I think a lot of people, when I start calling this out, recognize it right away. But if you don't recognize it now, look around for the next 2 weeks. Okay, so I wanted to give you that lengthy disclaimer before I got to the body of my answer for this question, because I don't want to feel like I'm doing that, because we need conservatives and Christians to be bold now and not constantly wringing their hands and giving apologies rather than apologias. That's not what I'm doing. But I will say this, at the risk of contradicting everything I just said. For men and women to start getting attracted to each other again, which is really holy in marriage, right? Men and women are supposed to be, men and wife are supposed to be attracted to each other. That's what gets you through, right? We didn't take a vow of celibacy. I didn't. If you're a married man, you didn't. Your wife didn't. My wife didn't. So it's really holy, and it's called the marital act to have sex with each other and to do so often. How do we know that? Because the graces from the marital act are cumulative. They're cumulative, meaning the more you do it, the better, right? As long as you're not contracepting. It is literally, it's not as good, it's not as holy. I'm not saying that as some of the other sacraments like the Source and Summit, but the more the better with all the sacraments. Got it? So attraction, physical attraction to the whole person, body and soul, but body is a big part of it, especially for men, is a big deal, right? And attraction works a little bit different, man for woman, woman for man. I'm not saying it doesn't, but look at how the feminists, through really the agency of Satan, have struck at, in themselves, woman and woman, man and man, what's most attractive to the other side. Women are saying, oh, don't work out, don't make yourself beautiful for your husband. That's patriarchy, that's chauvinism, that's misogyny. What that really is nonsense. No. If you love someone, man or woman, you want to work out and look good for them. But especially women for men, because the bigger part of, they've done studies on this neurologically, a bigger part of what makes men attracted to women. And look how Satan has chipped away at the, like you said it, protectiveness, the manliness, the high testosterone nature of a man. Hey, I could crush that guy if he comes over and tries to mess with you or the kids. That's healthy. That women like that. That turns them on. That's good. That's holy. Men should be able to crush an aggressor who attempts to harm a wife or kids, his or his neighbors, right? So look how domesticated and neutered the average Christian man is. And then recall, there's 2 parts to every feminist act: omission by the man, commission by the woman. Woman stepping up, being active where she's supposed to be passive. And the man's supposed to be active, not passive, and they swap places. Man's supposed to be expressive, woman's supposed to be receptive. So it does have to begin with the man. That's what I'm saying. Men, even if their wives aren't attracted to them because they're, can bench press the bar and, have never acted overly protective or even a little bit protective of their wives, and don't lead the family in prayer, which women are also attracted to and by, and don't really lead in any appreciable way. I mean, this is what most people are growing up with in the burbs and in the urbs. I'm just calling it how everyone sees it. So men aren't attractive to women. Women aren't making themselves attracted to men. Body positivity movement comes straight from the devil. It's bad. Cardiologists say it's bad, right? It's bad for women's hearts and veins to not work out for an hour a day. And it's bad for their marriages, which is more important than what the cardiologists say. You should be attracted to each other, should be having lots and lots of what the left would call unprotected marital sex. That's a healthy society. Not only will there be more kids, but there will be a lot more love, a lot more sacramental grace by and between maritable couples. I mean, it's called the marital act. So men have to lead here. Men have to begin. Men have to go out and you can't just start leading without working on yourself. You got to lift weights. Got to pray more privately. Men, you have to get off the porn. How can I say this? Only a cuck is into porn. You have to stop with the porn. Like cold turkey. If a man's listening to this and he's addicted to porn, there is nothing more cucked than porn. I mean, contraception's a close second. Contracepting on your wife, that sounds like a guy with low T. But porn is the killer from the female point of view. And it also makes you less attracted to your wife for a lot of reasons we don't need to go into. So men have to be celibate, aside from looking at their wives. You should be really attracted to your wife. You want to both really be into each other. And this is just common sense stuff. Sounds like as interesting as a novel dissertation, and it would make a really bad dissertation. Why? Because even though it sounds novel in our day, it's very old and it's very basic and it's very common sense stuff. That's how odd 2021 is. It's a clown world out there, Jim.
Yeah, no doubt. And you drill down on, look, when we're talking about equality in the right vision of things between husband and wife, man and woman, we're talking about an equal dignity is what we're speaking of. But to get at who we really are in terms of our complementarity, that's where we really have to look into these things. Now, St. Paul was pretty clear about some things in Ephesians 5. And by the way, to that first part of your answer, you do a great job in the book pointing out this category for us, the perfectionist fallacy. No husbands meet Christ's mark, so therefore no wives have to obey any husbands might be something that the so-called Christian feminists, as you write, can claim compliance with sacred scriptural passages like Ephesians 5. So they'll hear that and they'll say, well, I don't have to follow that because my husband doesn't meet Christ's mark. Therefore, I'm obeying the passage without actually having to do this. But you write, they're actually dismissing it altogether. And going along with this, where we are today, you say, quote, in parish after parish around the United States, the sexual revolutionaries, for one instance, have even censored one of the most explicit scriptural marital instructions, Ephesians 5:21-24, in the Catholic Missal. You say, contrast St. Paul's great pains to broach the subject with the modern church's great pains to avoid it. Speak into this a little bit for us.
Well, we just passed what I like to call Ephesians 5 Sunday, which comes up, I guess, once every 2 years liturgically, right? I think it was 2 Sundays ago, maybe 3 Sundays ago. Yeah. I celebrate it like the Super Bowl because it's hilarious. It comes only once every 2 years, unlike the Super Bowl. No, seriously. It was censored at my church. It was bracketed. They didn't read it. In the Novus Ordo parishes where they do read Ephesians 5 in full, which is to say the Word of God, the inerrant Word of God, that women are to be subject to men in all things, as Sarai called Abram Lord, right? If they do read it, they blush. And if they do read it in a typical Novus Ordo parish, the priest sermonizes not such as to exegete the gospel, but such as to mitigate its real worth and value, and everyone's blushing. The point is this, Jim. There's one perfect man, and it is not me, right? It was Jesus Christ. And Jesus was celibate for life. He took the church as his bride. The Catechism of Trent, called the Roman Catechism, is very explicit that women must follow men in all things, citing Ephesians 5 and other passages in Paul, except in grave sin, right? Not prudential matters. A woman can't say, well, prudentially, I don't want to follow. In all things aside from grave matter, she must follow her husband.
Yeah, we're going to be right back after this. And again, want to encourage you, get this book, The Case for Patriarchy, SophiaInstitute.com. Tim breaks this open, gives you everything you need to know on what he's talking about right there, but also he's going to break open the virtues that we need. We're going to get into that when we get back. Stay tuned.
Prayer in time of affliction. Blessed, O Lord, be thy name forever. Who has permitted this affliction to come upon us? We cannot escape it, but must of necessity fly to thee to help us and turn it to our good. Lord, we are now in affliction. Our souls are ill at ease, for we are much troubled with this present suffering. Let it please thee, O Lord, to deliver us, for poor wretches that we are. What can we do without thee? Thy mighty hand can do all things. Give us patience, O Lord, and strength and peace. Help us, O God, and we will not fear, no matter how grievously we may be afflicted. O Lord, thy will be done. Welcome be the will of God. Sacred Heart of Jesus, we place our trust in thee. Amen.
Our network-produced shows are some of our most powerful programming, available as podcasts at thestationofthecross.com or for Android and Apple mobile devices on our iCatholic Radio mobile app. Be uplifted in your faith and inspired to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. Listen today at thestationofthecross.com or on our iCatholic Radio mobile app. The Station of the Cross thanks our financial supporters who have enabled us to broadcast Catholic programs for more than 20 years. As a nonprofit lay organization not affiliated with your diocese, our apostolate is listener-supported. Through your generosity, we're able to inspire countless listeners with the gospel message and help lead them to a parish to be spiritually nourished by the sacraments. Thank you for your continued support, and may God bless you and your family.
Simple Truth, Jim Havens here. Our guest today, Timothy Gordon, author of the new book, The Case for Patriarchy, will be released on October 1st by Sophia Institute Press. You can find it at sophiainstitute.com. Learn more about Tim Gordon and all of his good work at timothyjgordon.com. Tim, you write this. You write that the man who, with holy fear and trembling, works out those 7 virtues, and you're talking here about the 4 cardinal virtues, the 3 theological virtues. You say if they can work those out, they will doubtlessly acquire the primary male virtue, the 8th, which is leadership, you say. You say many good Christian householders today have earned all but the last, lacking only the fortitude to assert their leadership. After all, feminism, working through the popular culture, has aggressively and narrowly targeted the patriarchy of the home. Many good men have constructed unled but otherwise decent homes simply because they lack the fortitude to contradict the popular culture by justly demanding godly obedience of their wives. So some people are going to hear that, and that's going to make them cringe a little bit, but hear that again: justly demanding godly obedience of their wives. And you really encourage men here. You say, explain to your wife the spiritual deadliness of the subversion of Christ's relation to his church. Explain to your wife clearly the vocational first principle that disobedience of a husband equates to a wifely lack of love for Jesus, just as failing to lead and to defend is a husbandly lack of love for Christ. Break this open a little bit for us.
Well, don't take my word for it. I would tell men and women out there, take the Roman Catholic Church. When you read the book of Sirach in the Old Testament, I think it's Sirach chapter 15, it's really clear. Yeah, maybe it's Sirach 25, sorry. When you read all these places in the writings, the inerrant writings of St. Paul, I'm talking not just Ephesians 5, I'm talking 1 Corinthians, Timothy, Titus, Colossians. There are many, many places where it's utterly clear. And like I said before, the first and greatest biblical exegetes that even, not just Catholics, but even the Protestants accept, they don't like the scholastics like Aquinas, but they do like the patristics, like Augustine and his mentor Ambrose, and the translator of the Bible into Latin, Jerome, and St. John Chrysostom, an Eastern father. They like those guys, and they're the first ones to have a crack at what the Bible really meant. And all of these guys I cite in my book, Case for Patriarchy, as saying these 7 places in the Pauline scriptures and the places all throughout the Old Testament, and eventually it will be codified in the Roman Catechism. It makes it really, really explicit. A wife who is to obey her husband in all things, she's to be subservient to him in all things, disobeys Christ by disobeying her husband. A wife shows a lack of love for Christ by showing a lack of love for her husband. It's really, really clear. There's a short paragraph in the Roman Catechism, the duties of husband to wife, the duties of wife to husband, that I quote directly in the book. It's, anyone can read it. We could read it here on air. It's a very short paragraph, and it is very explicit. The idea of mutual submission between man and wife, technically it's right, because man submits one thing to his wife, his life, right? If there's a terror attack, he submits his life for hers, not the other way around. That is what the Christian vocation calls the man to. And, that's a biggie. But because of that, the wife submits in all other things. She takes his orders, right? He makes the calls. He can tell her what to do. He can decide single-handedly how to run the household. Now, this is just the description that I've made of a good monarch. Feminists have inverted that notion by talking about all monarchy as tyranny, which is a really strange thing. It's like talking about all cars, even $1 million, Lamborghini, as a jalopy. Why would one assume if you buy a car brand new that it's not going to be properly functioning? A properly functioning monarch is not a despot. A properly functioning household father is a goodly patriarch that will get his wife and kids to heaven. And remember, that's what it's all about. There are 2 vocations. There are 2 sacramental vocations anyway. There's the path of ordination, and then, which is fatherhood, spiritual fatherhood, and there's the path of biological fatherhood or biological motherhood. And when you take the path of biological fatherhood, as 99 to 1 of us do, it's literally the path to heaven. Just as for a man who chooses the cloth, the priesthood is the path to heaven. And when a man who is always called to be, as the Jesuits call it, a man for others, which always made me laugh in high school, but it's true. You're called to be a man for others. As a priest, you're getting your congregation, other people's biological children, to heaven. You don't have your own biological children. When you're a biological father, the only other sacramental vocation, then you're really called to get your kids and your wife to heaven. You are the priest, the prophet, and the king of the home. You're standing in the shoes of David the king, David and Christ, ultimately, men from Bethlehem to heaven. You're standing in the shoes of Elijah the prophet, and you're standing in the shoes of Moses, the greatest of the Old Testament priest offices. And you have to do all 3 of those. Accordingly, a man's vocation, and wives have to, their main vocation is in fealty and obedience and affectionateness and love for their husband, support for their husband and their kids. But a man, when he gets home from work, we haven't even talked about breadwinning, which is a major part of this, right? Mm-hmm. We're all called, 6 different encyclicals in the 20th century reaffirm the old principle that we are called to one-income households. as Christians, and it must be the man. Ephesians 25 is very specific. The great shame is brought on a household by a man who is supported by his wife. So this means that a man getting home from work, yes, this is one of his functions under his vocation of father, earning bread, earning money, but it's the lowest of the vocations. And he must, like Theoden of Rohan says, my riders can't support you. They have a 3-day long ride to war. They must have strength enough for war at the end of a long ride. When we go to work as men during the day, that's 8 hours of the least important aspect of our vocation. And most men don't approach it this way because men are really crappy leaders now, if we're being candid. Most men get home and they feel their job is done, which is extra tawdry because 70% of these men have working wives anyway. So they're not even tending to that in an exclusive way. But the most important part of our jobs begins when we get home from work tired. It's playing with our kids and praying with our kids and checking up on our kids. You have to play with them, pray with them, check up on them. These correspond with the offices of priest, prophet, king, right? You have to chasten them some if little Johnny gets into trouble. You have to commend them some if little Susie did good on her paper at school. You have to play with all of them, and you sure as heck need to pray with all of them. And men aren't doing this, right? They get home, we're driven by materialism. They get home and they think, oh, this is the most I'll give. I went to work, and they turn on the TV or whatever it is. Not that I'm anti-TV. You can watch TV with the family. But you got to be playing with and praying with your family. That's the only way to lead them. Or else, what do you wind up with? The Married with Children Fox sitcom as a life, where your kids hate you. There's bitterness and acrimony between husband and wife. The life looks horrible. The married life looks horrible. And this is not how God intended it. If we play together and pray together, led by men, it will look appropriately attractive. Your wife will be attracted to you and, dare I say, want to have sex with you. And your kids will like you and think you're cool. But you got to be strong and tough and leaderly and prayerful and holy, or no one's going to like you, man.
Great stuff. And you say the response must take hold of society, one family, one married couple at a time. Again, the book is The Case for Patriarchy. It will be released October 1st, Sophia Institute Press. Find it at sophiainstitute.com and learn more about Tim, his good work at timothyjgordon.com. Tim, such a blessing to have you on with us today. Thank you so much.
It's been a blessing to be here. Thanks a million. I really appreciate it.
All right. God bless you.
Hardwood Mall underwrites with